Hi everybody, welcome back to Stellalytics. My name is Stella and I'm a Microsoft certified Azure Enterprise Data Analyst and a Microsoft certified Power BI Data Analyst. And today I will be treating the first in the series of case studies. And the reason for this is I believe that these case studies simulate a real life environment, a real life scenario, the day-to-day work in the life of a cloud data analyst. So we will be faced with these issues. And if you're preparing for DP-500 exams or you're considering a career as a cloud data analyst, this is the channel for you because I will be discussing concepts like data warehousing, security, serverless and dedicated SQL pools, query performances, report performance, refresh process, external tools, and all of those things that we will come across in our day-to-day work as cloud data analysts. So stick with me. Now, this company, the overview, the company sells enriched financial data to a variety of external customers. It has a main office in Los Angeles and 2 branch offices in New York and Seattle. The data infrastructure of the company. Why is this important? As a cloud data analyst or as a data analyst, you should understand the data infrastructure of the company, because if you don't understand the data infrastructure, how do you profess solutions? How do you trace issues when you're faced with bottlenecks or problems? How do you trace them? Okay, so let's dig in. The first one is this company has a 50 terabyte data warehouse that uses an instance of SQL Server on Azure virtual machine. So why is this important? An instance of SQL Server on Azure virtual machine. So what this literally means is that it uses the full version of SQL Server in the cloud without having to manage on-premises hardware. It's a platform as a service offering, meaning it is scalable. It can be adapted to fit the business requirements, and it has everything that the developers need to run, to build, and to manage applications in the cloud. And the best part is it is available on the Azure, and it's part of the Azure offerings. So hold that thought. The second one is the data warehouse populates an Azure Synapse Analytics workspace that is accessed by the external customers. Currently, the customers can access all the data. Wait a minute. We are dealing with financial data here, and you have everybody having access to the financial data, meaning they may be able to see credit card numbers. All that thought. Security issue, actually. Number 3, it has one Power BI workspace named FinData that contains a single data set. The data set contains financial data from around the world. So the workspace is used by 10 internal users and 1 external customer. The single data set has the following 2 data sources: the data warehouse and the Synapse Analytics Serverless SQL Pool. So let's consider this for a moment. The data warehouse. That means the company runs like it has an OLAP system in place, online analytical processing system. And if you understand the Azure architecture, you will know that between the OLTP and the OLAP system, you're likely to have your Azure SQL database. And the Azure SQL database is responsible for dimensional modeling. You can enforce the referential integrity, in your Azure SQL DB before it goes into your OLAP system. Now, the OLAP system is optimized for reporting and analysis. So your OLAP system, that is where your business intelligence team, they build a semantic layer. They use a semantic model, to create like aggregates and, so that it is accessible by the analyst for analysis and for reporting. And data in the data warehouse is denormalized. What does that mean? You have bigger tables, you have bigger tables mostly because the data is aggregated. But data in the OLTP system is normalized. That means you have smaller tables and it's to eliminate data redundancy, and to enforce data integrity. So that's sort of a sketchy difference. I will do a video on that real soon. And also for the data warehouse, it does have a capacity. It has a capacity. That's important to note as well. And you also have your serverless SQL pool. Now, the serverless SQL pool is used for querying your data lake. Your data lake contains raw data. And your serverless SQL pool, what it does is it enables you perform exploratory analysis, helps you to get a feel of your data, to know what data exists in your data lake. And your serverless SQL pool is scalable. It comes in as a built-in feature with your resource. When you provision a workspace in the cloud, your serverless SQL pool comes in as a built-in feature. I have a video on that, on provisioning workspaces in Azure, so you can look at it, you'll understand what I mean. The serverless SQL pool comes in as a built-in feature. It's scalable, and it's optimized for computing abilities. It does not have a storage capacity, unlike your data warehouse that has a storage capacity and also computing abilities, computing capacity, if I can use that. So that is the difference between the two, or some of the differences between the two. Yeah. And the last point is users frequently query the Synapse Analytics workspace by using Transact SQL. Now, Transact SQL is a version of SQL used in the Azure cloud, and you can use it to query both serverless SQL pools and dedicated SQL pools. So what issues are the users facing in the organization? I want to believe the users were mostly analysts outside of the Azure walls. Now, some users indicate that the visuals in Power BI reports are slow to render when making filter selections, and users indicate that queries against the serverless SQL pool fail occasionally because the size of 10 DB has been exceeded. And users indicate that the data in Power BI reports is stale. You will discover that the refresh process of the Power BI model occasionally times out. So let's try to see, let's see what's next. So now we have changes that need to be implemented. We need to carry out like a data transformation project to improve things in this company. Now, what we want to do, the first thing is, into the existing Power BI datasets, we need to integrate an external data source in JSON that is accessible by using the REST API. Now, part of our job, or part of your job as a cloud data analyst, is to be able to integrate different data sources, yes, from wherever they may be coming from. Integrate them. The next one is to build a new data set in the Fin Data workspace by using data from the Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool. Okay. 3, provide all the customers with their own Power BI workspace to create their own reports. Each workspace will use the new data set in the Fin Data workspace. I think this is an attempt to curb the security issue. Then the next one, implement subscription levels for the customers. Each subscription level will provide access to specific rows of financial data. Number 5, deploy pre-built data sets to Power BI to simplify the query experience of the customers. And number 6, provide the internal users with the ability to incorporate machine learning models loaded to the dedicated SQL pool. So let's dig in. Question 1, you need to identify the root cause of the data refresh issue. What should you use? Part of how to navigate these issues is note your keywords. Note your keywords. Either you're writing the exam or it's a real life scenario. What are the keywords? And the keyword here is the refresh process. Now, what is the problem? It says you discover that the refresh process of the Power BI model occasionally times out. These are key points. Refresh process of the Power BI model. Right. So some of the answers could be, oh, usage metrics report in powerbi.com. For emphasis sake, the answers are in red. Usage metrics report in powerbi.com. Hello, powerbi.com. That's Power BI service. Usage metrics report. What does it track? It actually tracks how your users interact with the reports. This doesn't have anything to do with the data refresh issue. Okay, it's how your users interact with the report. Another suggestion is your performance analyzer and the Power BI desktop. Okay, to some extent, but the performance analyzer, what it does is it examines your report elements. It doesn't really address the data refresh issue. So it looks at your report elements and sees and tries to figure out, oh, how are they performing in terms of such as your DAX and your visuals, to see how much time does it take them to load. So that is not what we're looking at here. The answer is query diagnostics in Power Query, because you're trying to look at why, to find out why, what is causing this refresh process. Why is it timing out? Why is it taking too long? It has to be your query diagnostics in Power Query. And why is this important? Because your Power Query performs an action known as a query folding, where it tries to push the query execution back to the source as much as possible, so then it doesn't have to undo too many queries in the Power BI environment. And this is actually best practice. The problem there is it may be performing too much query folding. It may be folding all of your queries. It may be folding all of your queries that is causing the data refresh issue. So you have to use your query diagnostics in Power Query to know what exactly is going on, so that if it's folding all of the queries, you can then look for ways, to enhance your query, or to look for how to, maybe you are having too many joins, things like that. So the way to access your query diagnostics in Power Query is to come to your file, is to come to your home tab in the Power Query environment, go to tools. When you click on tools, and then you can see all the options: diagnose, start diagnosis, start diagnostics, and the options. And also you need to go to your options and settings as well, so that you can choose how you want the queries, how you want your analysis to go, the query analysis or the query diagnostics. Do you want an aggregator? Do you want a report? Do you want a detailed report? All of these things. So yeah, query diagnostics and Power Query. Next issue. Question 2. Which two possible tools can you use to identify what causes the report to render slowly? Which two? Synapse Studio? Now, what is the problem? That's the first thing. It says some users indicate that the visuals in Power BI reports are slow to render when making filter selections. Now, what are the keywords? Visuals in Power BI reports. That is key. That's what you need. Visuals in Power BI reports. Is it a Synapse Studio? No, because we're talking about Power BI reports, so it must be the Power BI desktop. We are not even talking about dashboards here. We're talking about your Power BI desktop, because it is a report. So is it your Synapse Studio? Obviously not. Is it your Azure Data Studio? No, because we're not talking databases. Now, which two? Your DAX Studio and your Performance Analyzer in Power BI desktop. Definitely. Now, you first start with your Performance Analyzer, because when you interact with the reports in Power BI desktop, when you interact with the report elements, it tells you the start time and the stop time of each of those visuals, how long it takes them to render. It shows you how long the DAX behind, even those visuals, the DAX behind your report elements, how long it takes the DAX to respond, how long those queries take to run. It gives you a start time and a end time, and it shows you if there are other processes that are consuming or are affecting these reports and report elements. So when you've done the performance analysis in Power BI desktop, if you want a deeper dive, then you go to your DAX Studio. Now, the DAX Studio has to be installed on your system and must be incorporated in your Power BI. So what do I mean by incorporated in your Power BI? You can bring it as an external tool in your Power BI. So you just click on external tool, and you install the DAX Studio. You connect your Power BI to your DAX Studio. So when you're done with what you're doing in performance, in your Performance Analyzer, you move it to the DAX Studio to further check what the issue is with your DAX. Because the DAX Studio will tell you how much time, tell you what the query and what is wrong with the DAX, what is causing the DAX to run really slowly, and you have the opportunity to optimize your DAX in the DAX Studio. Right, so if you were to access your performance analyzer, you come to view and you see the right here, performance analyzer, and you start recording, interact with elements, with your report elements, and then it shows you. Then you click on stop. You can export your reports and then do a deeper dive. So the next question is, you need to integrate the external data source to support the planned changes. Which 3 actions should you perform in sequence? To answer, move the appropriate actions from the list of actions. Okay, leave that out. So the target is into the existing Power BI data set. You need to integrate an external data source in JSON that is accessible by using the REST API. Question, what is a REST API? Now, REST API or RESTful API stands for Representational State Transfer, application interface. So what it does basically is it's an interface that two computer systems use to exchange info securely over the internet using HTTP technologies like GET, POST, PUT, pull, I think should have been there, delete. Yeah, so it's between 2 computers, your client and your server. The client could be your laptop, your phone, whatever you can use to communicate over the internet. So when this data leaves the client, it leaves as JSON data. It gets to the API, and from the API, the request is sent by the client to the server using HTTP technologies, and the server responds. So it's a request and a response. The server responds and sends the answer to the client, and then it arrives as a JSON data to the client. So, and we have the API and we also have the RESTful API. The difference is the API is deals with web servers, but the RESTful API deals with all different kinds of servers. So that is the difference. So now what we want to do is we want to integrate an external data source in JSON that is accessible by using the REST API. What do we do? Of course, the first thing is if you go to your Power BI environment, you see the get data. You need to have a source. There has to be a source because there has to be a web data source where you're getting your data from. And when you bring it into your Power BI desktop, you will have to expand the attributes, expand it to show the records, then into rows and into columns and all of that. Then you publish your model. That's what it is. That is the sequence, because you have the JSON format in the Power BI. Power BI accepts JSON format. So that's it. Next. You need to create Power BI reports that will display data based on the customer subscription level. And which 3 actions should you perform in sequence? I love this question. Yes, I do. This is tackling the security issue. And what's the target? We need to implement subscription levels for the customers. Each subscription level will provide access to specific rows of financial data. Now, keywords, subscription levels, specific roles. Why is this important? Because this can tell us the difference between static RLS and dynamic RLS. The static row level security and dynamic row level security. And when you have subscription levels, that means we are grouping the customers. And with the static RLS, you group your users according to a set of attributes and you apply predetermined set of rules to those users. But with your what is this now? With your dynamic RLS, you have a user and you apply a predetermined set of rules to that user. So that's what it means basically. So in this case, we are dealing with a static RLS. Because we are having subscription levels, that means the subscription level could be high-paying customers, or it could be maybe managers, the sales team, and things like that. So the first thing is we have to create a role level security role in Power BI Desktop, and that is why we have this diagram here. Modeling, you go to the modeling tab in the Power BI Desktop. When you click on it, then you find manage roles. Here, manage roles. When you click on manage roles, then it opens another interface where you have your roles, you have the tables, and then you have another space where you can enter your DAX expression. So that takes us to create a DAX expression. When you create a DAX expression, then you can publish it to Power BI service, and in Power BI service you can add members to the role level security roles in Power BI service. But the first two levels need to be performed in your Power BI Desktop. Now, why do I have enable bidirectional filtering here? The reason I have enable bidirectional filtering is because if we were to carry out a dynamic role level security, it would have been to enable bidirectional filtering. But because it's static, we would have to go with the first three. Yeah. Okay. Now, question 5, you need to recommend a solution to add new fields to the financial data Power BI dataset with data from the Microsoft SQL Server data warehouse. Now, targets to build a new data set in the Fin Data Workspace by using data from the Synapse Analytics dedicated pool, SQL pool. Now, the keyword is Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool. Do you need an XMLA endpoint? No, we don't need an XMLA endpoint because we are not trying to connect with third-party software. If we were trying to connect to Tabular Editor, we would have used an XMLA endpoint. Maybe you need a Tabular Editor to publish the data or something, or one of those things. If you want to connect with third-party software, definitely use your XMLA endpoint. And we don't need the Azure purview. The question is not asking us about data lineages. We are not trying to trace the data lineage here. We're not trying to trace where the data is coming from or where it's going to. What we are trying to do here is to add new fields to the financial data Power BI dataset. And so what we need to do is the on-premises data gateway. On-premises, your data gateway, you have the personal data gateway, and then you have the standard data gateway. The standard data gateway is your on-premises data gateway. Remember that your Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool resides in the Azure cloud. And your workspace that we're talking about here is in Power BI service. So what you need is an on-premises data gateway to be able to access the Azure cloud. Now, question 6 says you need to recommend a solution to resolve the query issue of the Serverless SQL pool, and the solution was minimize impact on the users. What should you recommend? Keyword, TempDB and Serverless SQL pool. What is the issue? It says users indicate that queries against the Serverless SQL pool fail occasionally because the size of TempDB has been exceeded. Okay. Now, it says the size of TempDB has been exceeded. So the question is, what is TempDB? TempDB stands for temporary database. And anything, mostly when you're working with a serverless SQL pool, no, not mostly. When you're working with your serverless SQL pool, what you're doing is temporary views, temporary tables. It's all temporary because it has only computing abilities. It does not have storage capacity. Yes, it is scalable. Yeah, we understand that. So, and it's majorly meant for exploratory data analysis and meta warehousing. You can only use it to connect to the data lake, explore data, and visualize some of those data just to have a feel of the data in the data lake. So the TempDB is a temporary database. It's used by SQL servers. It's used by SQL servers basically. By SQL servers to temporarily store data. So, and the TempDB is for the serverless SQL pool is limited in size. It is 100 MB. It is limited in size. That is why the size of the TempDB was emphasized in this question. It is limited in size. But when you're talking about When you're talking about the dedicated SQL pool, your data warehouse, your data warehouse has 399 GB of temp DB per 100 data warehouse units. You see the difference. It is huge. Now, the size of temp DB is dependent on the size of your data warehouse, the size of your data warehouse. But in your serverless SQL pool, you have 100 MB. So what should you do? Do you update the statistics for the serverless SQL pool? No, we can't update because now the queries are failing. So there's no point updating the statistics. It is a best practice, to update the statistics for your serverless SQL pool, but that doesn't solve the problem here. Do you execute the SP set process data limit stored procedure for the serverless SQL pool? No, we can't do that. Already, for the fact that the queries are not even being executed, there's no point trying to set a data limit. No point. Because it means the queries have exceeded the size of the temp DB. So the logical thing to do would be to move the data from the serverless SQL pool to a dedicated SQL pool. And now you can allocate your resources to those queries, determine what happens, downstream. You can think of what you should do, like how many times those queries should be executed, or maybe you want to put some incremental measures in place. You can do some other things as best practice when you move it to the serverless SQL pool to manage resources. Now, the seventh and I believe the last question, you need to recommend a solution for the customer workspace to support the plan changes. Which two configurations should you include in the recommendation? Now, the target is to provide all the customers with their own Power BI workspace to create their own reports. Each workspace will use the new data set in the Fin Data workspace. Keywords, their own Power BI workspace. Keyword, create their own reports. So if you're asking them to have their own Power BI data workspace and their own Power BI workspace, you need to grant them the build permission for the financial data to each customer. You need to grant the build permission. You have to, because the Fin data, the new data set, it resides in the Fin data workspace. You cannot publish the financial data to the web, because when you publish it to the web, then you have security issues. When you're publishing to the web, that means you are putting it in you are using the app feature in Power BI service, and the app feature only allows them to view and interact with the dashboard, or view and interact with it wherever you have put it. It doesn't allow them to build. And also, you need to set use data sets across workspaces to enable. Remember, each customer is having his own workspace, so you need to give them that permission. You have to enable them to use data from the Fin data workspace for them to be able to work with it as the Power BI admin. So how do you do this? In the Power BI admin portal, you go to tenant settings, workspace settings, and you let them use data sets across workspaces. That would be the solution. So thank you very much for staying with me on this case study. And if you like this, like, share, comment, subscribe. I'm looking at your comments. I'm looking forward to your comments. And you can subscribe, put on your notification button so that when I load the next case study, you will receive it in time. And thank you for sticking with me. If there's something you want to contribute, put it in the comment section. I want to hear from you. Thank you, and good luck.